As AI reshapes how brands connect with consumers, trust has increasingly become one of the most defining competitive advantages. Here to explore this very topic with us, please join me in welcoming Lucinda Barlow, Head of International Marketing at Uber. Welcome. Timothy Young, CEO of Jasper AI, and Mike Minton, Chief Product Officer at Twitch. Delighted to have you. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having us.
All right. Timothy, let's jump right into it. I want to talk about marketing for humans versus marketing for AI. You've talked about this very notion, if you will. What does that mean for you, and how do you differentiate between the two?
Well, I think that's what, CMOs are trying to figure out right now, which is like we've seen all this AI and the tools and where you can do, more content at speed and variation and scale. But then you're also juxtaposed with, your workforce, which has become increasingly anxious about what does the future mean. So I think for CMOs, it's about, hey, how do we paint a vision, right, where we take the best of AI and the best of humans and bring them together and really light up that path. And we've seen it done in software development, I think, really effectively, but we're starting to see, I think, the next part of organizations be that marketing department where you can actually blend the two.
That blend-in looks like what? Maybe you can give Uber as an example.
Yeah, I would love to. And Tim, I'm going to put a point of view out there, which is, I think humans, you who are moved by emotion, feels, culture, social norming, the improbable, the unexpected, are much harder to market to, more complex than those agents that are, comprehensive data and logic and extreme sort of resolution. And, what does it look like at Uber? The agents are still a small audience. We know that they're coming, We know that in the agentic world, actually being a brand that is chosen by name is really important. And so we do have this dual approach. You do want to make sure that you are showing up for agents. You're winning the LLMs. You're winning, there is, having a very strong brand, a brand that is talked about, is one that is trusted. That is definitely an impact, a sort of input into winning that. But for humans, we want to be a human brand. We want to make sure that we have deep connection, that there is trust, there is consistency. And so that really means you've got to make sure that the things that your brand has grown to today remains true.
I'm kicking off with this question because as we increasingly move towards marketing to AI agents, again, the crux of this conversation is around authenticity. It's around trust. Do those things still matter as we increasingly move towards marketing toward AI agents?
I think they matter more than ever. More so. And I've actually had debates about this. I don't think everybody believes that. But I think whenever you are facing disruption, I think brand becomes even more important. I think that the brand showing up in people's minds and then you having a trusted experience, you delivering on the experience that you had set the expectation in is so important for a human audience. For an agentic audience, you are winning on many, many, many vectors. I think there is one audience which is influencers that is really between two. The influencers, creators, how you are talked about is definitely a sort of shared audience between both humans and agents. But I would put it out there that trust is more important than ever.
You mentioned creators and influencers. Perfect segue to you, Mike, over at Twitch. Brand marketers obviously spend a lot of time thinking about content. Twitch creators spend a lot of their time thinking about building community. Which matters more in an AI world? Is it one versus the other?
Yeah, I think content in this world is like everywhere and AI generated and endless in many ways, right? The real value is the human belonging connection that the creators on Twitch are creating with their audience. And as it relates to AI, I think one of the things also to understand is just really a lot of skepticism. We obviously have a lot of Gen Z audience. And so for marketers that are thinking about the use of AI and how AI is part of their creative campaigns, et cetera, it's maybe a cautionary tale and making sure that we're not missing the message as it relates to that human connection piece. Even small things like blurred pixels in an AI generated image can set a community off sometimes, or an audience off.
Give me a for instance.
What's that?
What do you mean? You said set the audience off in terms of?
What I mean is that have conversations about the technology that get in the way of that human connection, and they're literally upset. And from a product development perspective, obviously AI is a huge enabler in how we can help solve problems creators care about. But when they sense that there's AI behind the scenes, it immediately starts from a point of skepticism. And I think that's really important to understand. And I was looking at a recent Gallup poll this morning, and 41% of Gen Z strongly identify with anxious about AI, right? So I know we're all in the middle of it thinking about AI for marketing and AI for technology and AI for product development, but everybody is not where we're at as it relates to that level of comfort that we have.
Are you seeing that same level of skepticism, certainly at Uber and even perhaps with you at Jasper?
I think it's market dependent. I think there are some markets, Asian markets particularly, it's much more socially acceptable to use AI in creative. But I think as a brand, I do think you have to be very conscious about where you are going to use Gen AI in which aspects of your brand and which aspects of the funnel. And I can talk about that briefly.
We certainly will momentarily.
Okay.
When you look at AI, the thing it can replicate today is taste. And I think that's where there's a big opportunity for marketers to put AI plus humans together. The way that you do that is, you use a process that is kind of like the antidote to AI slop, because Gen X, Gen Z, they all see slop. They also love the AI tools. My 16-year-old calls it chat, right? All his friends. He's now getting into girls. Every conversation, every text with them is mediated and reflected upon with chat. So they like the tools. They just want authentic experiences, especially when it comes to brands. So, what we work with marketers to do is, hey, take an AI output and then have a human edit it, right? That difference, the edits that you make over time with your brand, that is the taste of your brand, right? And then you can use that to continue to refine the process, because that taste layer is what separates you and makes you authentic.
Let me level set for a second, because we keep talking about creating an authentic experience. How do you define that? Like, what does authenticity mean for each of your respective brands? And is it something that AI can mimic? It's got the data points.
I'll give
Push back on that.
Yeah, I'll give an interesting example where it can work really well. There's a creator named Vidal. He's created an AI personality called Neurosama, and he interacts with that personality, and they have really amazing content. They build communities around this stuff, but that's where that human is there and present, and that's the authenticity and the trust layer that's built, that then people can set aside the technology and be entertained. So I think that's an example of where that human is just really important in that.
How do you define it?
I think what we've seen in working with CMOs of global brands is that they're in a new arc, right? So it used to be very much authority, right? Your brand and your authenticity was what your PR and marketing team said about you. Then it moved with social media to like affinity, right? Your authenticity of the brand was really about what your community, your customers, your audience said about you. And now I think we're in this kind of latest stage where those two are still a factor, but it's much more now about inference, which is what do the models say about you? And so you need to build authenticity not only with your audience, but through a consistent set of behavior and facts that the models are able to pick up on. Because the models are now judging you, and your customers, your audiences are basically consulting them first. And so for us, that's where we see that change in authenticity pattern.
How are you thinking about it? Knowing that the models are judging you.
I know. Authenticity is one of those really loaded words, isn't it? And firstly, I would say we actually don't use the word authenticity. I'm sure we do in a very, we throw it around. But if I think what really matters, firstly, if we're wanting to change human behavior, we know that actually requires deep connection. It requires a jolt. You've got to really connect with people, that there's something different about what you're doing. There's a deep habit that you are using today, whether that's how you get around your city or it's how you order your food or whatever. That is really hard to embed in people's memories, that needs to be different. And the way you do it is you are unlocking the sort of the doors of emotion. You are getting in there with extreme entertainment. You're getting in there with unexpected humor, with deep connection. There's different ways in, but they are really hard to replicate with AI. So if that could be called authenticity, That's on the sort of long term, how do we become really mentally available and build in your memory in order to change behavior. On the other side, if you are wanting to get a quick action, you're lower in the funnel, authenticity there could mean I just give you a relevant personal deal or something a message that is right now relevant for you in the moment. So take either way.
Did you want to add something?
Yeah, just say, I think authenticity is a function of trust over time, right? And trust in understanding the message and what's in it for me, et cetera. And so when I think of authenticity, it's that human element, but it's beyond that. It's that trust piece that's established through the message.
And I think there's a leadership quality of authenticity that's not often talked about, right? Which is you are leading your customers, you're leading your audiences. If you're just out there using AI to comment on every meme and every latest thing, you've diluted your own self, right? If you think about another area of creativity in the music world, how do we judge an artist's authenticity? It's over time. We look at their whole discography, their whole catalog, and we all know those artists that sold out their sophomore album to jump on some new music trend and hype train.
Anyone
right?
you're thinking of in particular?
No, I'm not. I used to work in the music industry, so I won't do that, right? I won't do that. But I think it's about staying true to yourself and having the courage to forge your own path. If you think about the AI models, what do? They know about the past, and they're a regression to the mean. So if you're just relying on them, you are more than likely going to come off over time as not authentic.
I totally agree with that. I think that knowing yourself and knowing how you express what your brand's expression is of a trend or a moment is very, very important for trust and authenticity, if we're calling it that.
Let's double click on Uber in particular, because you are leveraging AI, especially in brand imagery. And you've delineated and outlined a number of policies in terms of how you use it in a way that feels authentic and rewards trust. Walk us through the decision making that's been internal at Uber.
Yeah, we've been on sort of really looking at this over the last couple of years. We've been very early in adopting AI in our performance marketing, whether that is through GEO, through CRM, through our performance ads, our paid social, and so forth. And that has allowed us to be very quick and agile, and it's allowed us to be very relevant. Again, that is really for a short-term response. For longer-term brand building, we've been slower and more cautious, and probably brands here are also thinking how you have to look at your Gen AI creative policies probably every 3 months, because consumer sentiment changes. I think also the quality of the output changes. And I'll give you an example. 18 months ago, we really didn't use AI in above-the-line media. But we were looking at where could we do it. One of the things we know is that when we feature really delicious, craveable food in our Uber Eats ads, people are more likely to go, oh gosh, think about us for Friday night takeaway dinner. And but we were hesitant of using AI for that. And then the output became amazing. So for generic produce, whether that is like bananas or it's, pad thai or it's a sizzling steak, we can use AI now, and it looks great. We do actually indicate that it is Gen AI created. We do not use it, obviously, for any IP, for a KFC beautiful drumstick. That is their IP. That is so true to their brand.
You said you were originally hesitant. What changed your mind?
The quality of the output. It has to be perfect. It has to be, that a human cannot tell the difference, and it has to be. I guess the quality bar has to be very, very strong. Where we have been much more hesitant is in human representation. Humans are unbelievable. They don't even know it, but either they do know it or they can sense it. But I think human representation, you have to be very cautious with, particularly in brand media. We do not use it for protagonists today. Also, our earners, who are the drivers, the delivery partners on the platform, we actually use not just real humans, but real earners. And so that's part of our brand. So we've consciously said this is a lifeblood of Uber. It's super important to building a human connection. And so we keep those as real, But there are times where, like maybe the background image, sorry, the background crowd. There are other times where we will use Gen AI human representation.
I think for us at least, and with our audiences, we're very much in a transition period. And I'll give an example. We did what we thought would be a fun surprise and delight thing, create a cat category on Twitch. And the actual creative that created the asset used AI to generate it. Community detected it, and the whole conversation wasn't about the fun and surprise of having a cat category on Twitch. Sure. It was about the feeling of loss from a creative perspective that, AI had displaced the creative, and we had to spend a lot of time reactively messaging that, responding to that moment, and it was just a huge distraction. So I think for us, at least again with the younger audiences, and especially given it's so heavily creative, it's going to be some period of time. I'm not going to guess how long until it becomes much more accepted.
Well, yeah, I think when you look at young audiences, I think what they're being trained on, especially at educational institutions, is that AI does not have a lot of value, does not have a lot of originality. So if you're in an audience and a brand is talking to you and you know that it was AI generated, you're saying, hey, that brand doesn't really value me. Because as a customer or a prospect, you want to be selected, right? And if there's not a lot of value in that selection, then people will just move on. And a lot of these young generation, they're unfortunately children of COVID. They want that human touch. They're seeking that out. There's a lot of ways for them to have artificial experiences. So as a brand, I think you have to be very judicious about your use of AI, but then also how do you bring your team along to put in that empathy, that human touch, that authenticity.
Well said.
What's interesting, you said, especially with your demographic, primarily 18 to 34, they're quite resistant to AI. I mean, we've certainly seen college graduations where they're booing when anyone brings up artificial intelligence. Certainly with your community, they're a bit more hesitant about a company leveraging AI. You're talking about the fact that at Uber, when you're using it, you will actually say, we are using AI. So I'm kind of curious to hear the decision-making process in both regards. Do you need to say when you're using AI, if it's something in the background, do you need to say, hey, AI is running in the background, or is it just unnecessary theatrics?
Yeah, I will say for the most part, we try to avoid having a conversation about technology. And what we've learned is, and I'll give you just a real quick example, we built a tool to help creators successfully do brand activations. Make sure you hit the talking points, make sure you stay on script, etc. And when we first announced it, we weren't very cautious and we focused on the automation nature of it. And that was not well received. And what we went back with in clarification was to say, hey, what we care about is you getting paid from a brand. We built a tool to help you get paid. And when you frame it in problems they care about, the technology becomes secondary.
How are you thinking about it at Uber? I mean, why say we use AI to create this imagery? Because you wouldn't say, hey, we use Photoshop, another tool, another platform to use this imagery.
I think it's still, while it's still quite nascent, and I think while we're just erring on the side of caution. But I think it'll change. And I agree with you. I think as it becomes more normalized, it probably won't be needed. Also, publishers do also have it as a requirement. And so we will also obviously follow the publisher's policy.
You're erring on the side of caution because you don't want potential blowback from whom? The customers, the media, certainly not Fortune.
Yeah, I think when you have something new and it's a new thing that people are grappling with, I think even in their own minds. I think it's more just for our audience, and out of respect to our audience, we want to just give the transparency of the information. But we will keep looking at that, maybe in 3 months' time, do we change it? I think it's an interesting space to watch.
Certainly. Yeah. Well, I'll certainly be watching here at Fortune. Timothy, everybody talks about AI governance. Very few people talk about the actual org chart and where it should sit. I'm curious what you think AI governance should actually look like inside a company. And I'd love to hear from the others what they think as well.
I mean, increasingly we're seeing that it's shifting not just as an IT set of technology policies, but it is about the brand, right? And AI, I think for a lot of our customers, it's enabling them to produce more and more content at scale with variation. But it does need to really importantly have that governance and those guardrails. So much of the industry focuses on outputs, but when you can really use AI in an advantageous way is when you focus on the inputs. The more that you work with a model the more it starts to think and see and write like you or your brand, that's when it becomes very powerful. But that takes a lot of time and work. Everybody just wants to flick a switch, turn on personalization, flick a switch, have it adopt all of our brand guidelines, right? Which you can do, but to make it feel extremely unique. Because remember, these models, they're all a regression to the mean, right? Which is of their total data set, right? But your brand is not at the mean. You need your brand to stand out. And so I think that's where CMOs have taken, I think, the lead inside organizations to define what are the guardrails. Because they're in a unique position inside of a company where a lot of AI material, AI generated or assisted material, is leaving the corporate walls. It is going out to partners. It's going out to the ecosystem. It's going out to customers. And so we're increasingly see, kind of even at the board level, the CMO is partnering with chief legal officer to define that governance, right? This is what our brand is internally. This is how it's reflected externally, whether it's a human plus AI, or just AI.
What does that human governance look like, that AI governance, I should say, look like at Twitch?
Wow. I would say right now it's pretty much shared in terms of how it's used from a marketing, how we market to our audience, how we build products, how we solve safety, how our policies. So I think the unfortunate answer is it's probably the executive team that's leading the company at this point, and it's a very active conversation, learning, understanding. We're not as far ahead on the marketing side as some of the examples have been given here, so it's less of a concern, but certainly from a product policy safety perspective, it's an ongoing topic of conversation, often involves the CEO.
Our marketing legal team are actually amazing, like early agent adopters. So they build agents that can really speed up the process of reviews and check for compliance issues, IP violation, whatever it is. And so that's a huge help, because it's always a big stumbling block for you want to get something out the door. This actually really can help save time and also, reduce errors.
Yeah. Let me ask you this, Lucinda. I think one of the promises of AI is hyper-localization, hyper-personalization. You're heading Uber International, and you're in, some 70 countries at this point. When you're in about 70 different markets, how do you ensure that your messaging is consistent and you don't have 70 different messages that are disparate across so many different countries?
Yeah, it's definitely one of the challenges, and you want to be hyper locally relevant, because our brand really shows up. Well, the brand shows up the same, but the product is different. In India, you're getting on the back of a bike. In Brazil as well, and so the proposition is different in different markets, and your cities are different, and we want to ensure that we are hyper locally relevant. But also at scale, really challenging. Okay, and I think where there is an opportunity on the performance side, this is really easy to scale. Like AI does allow you to do localization at scale. We can really automate, translate, etc. On the brand side, we're still at a point where I think our best work is deeply locally relevant, and it has been informed by a local team that knows the culture inside out, etc. We will no doubt move. We've just launched our first World Cup campaign, in 17 markets, and this was not done with AI. It was done, working with a network and across teams. I think we will move to a place where we will get to work that is often developed in one single market, where we know we can resonate. We then decode that. What is it about that is there a human insight in here that's universal? And then what would we need to translate? What would we need to scale?
Timothy, I want to turn to you. I love that you use the word taste, quite intentional verbiage. How do you instruct an AI model to truly capture a brand's taste? Like, make this really real for attendees.
Yeah, I think, looking at it from another creative profession like interior design, I have a home office, like probably many of you, and I have like a huge bookshelf, and interior designer came in. Of course, I've got all my books and little trinkets and items I've collected over the years about me. That interior designer then sat and interviewed me. Hey, walk me through all these things. And then she rearranged and had restraint and removed things. And the difference between what I had and what she had that was like a high degree of taste, right? Like I could not personally aspire to that. That's why I hired, the creative professional there. But we see the same things like that, with AI. I'm kind of like the average model, right? But I need somebody to come in, somebody on your marketing team that really understands the human side, understands where the brand needs to go, understands the empathy of the customer, the heritage, right, of the brand, and then uses their creative expertise to be a tastemaker and to shift what the model is doing. And, that way that you can really lead the audience, right? And when you walk into a very refined space, you can tell somebody with a high degree of taste really set that out together. It wasn't just haphazardly laid out. And I think that's what people are looking for in marketing materials, right? They're fine with if 95% of it is AI generated or brainstormed. But again, like in most projects, it's that last 5% that makes it unique, that makes it your brand. And that's where you have to focus your talent, right? A lot of times I think large organizations, historically, they farm that out to agencies. And now they pull that work back in with AI, but then they look at their team and say, wow, I've got great project managers, but we relied on that taste factor to be external. So now you have to think, okay, how do we bring that inside and pair that with the AI, pair that with the governance? That's where you can find the magic, kind of accelerator for your brand.
Exactly, that refinement you allude to. Mike, let me turn over to you. Twitch has a highly engaged younger demographic, as we already noted. Brands love that. However, I think the tension occurs because brands want safety. Creators want authenticity. They want that unfiltered that unfiltered feel that viewers love. Live streaming leaves very little room for that. For it doesn't have any post-production editing. So how are you using AI to help brands find the right creators, but also avoid harmful content without also making the creators feel as though they're being micromanaged by algorithms?
Yeah, great question. Just the example I used earlier on the creator assist tool is an example, and some of the response initially was, is the AI going to tell me to smile? Right, and there was this worry, there's this dystopian future that the AI was going to manage your emotions and your authenticity with the audience. But obviously that wasn't what we were doing. We were just making sure that if there was a talking point, they hit the talking point. But more broadly, to your point, our ability to understand content at scale now is incredible. Right, there's about 250,000 live streams going on at one moment in a single moment right now. And now with LLMs, we can transcribe everything that's being said, everything that's going on in chat. So from a matchmaking perspective, for a brand, obviously they care about, is this a creator that can represent my brand well? Sometimes that's a function of suitability. Do they swear a lot? Or do they talk about topics that are relevant for my product and brand? Do they order a lot of Uber Eats? Maybe that's a great targeting criteria, right? In addition to, the audience. And so our ability to understand and help marketers find the right influencers if they want to do influencer marketing is just greatly increased in the last, few months. And then from a sentiment perspective, we can now help brands understand what's going on in chat. Many brands look at chat and they're like, "What? Oh my God, what's going on?" Well, now during an activation, we can pull out the sentiment, positive, negative, any insights we may gain from the audience. And the last thing I'll say is, from a media perspective, you're often going to target a specific set of channels or content that works for your brand, but in real time that can change. So now by being able to understand content near real time, if something is going on that is not suitable for that brand, we can suppress the impression, right? So across the board, from everything from media to influencer, we're just being able to do a much better job of helping marketers be successful.
Let's end here on this topic of trust, authenticity, brand value, risk, and how AI fits into all of that. Lightning round, what is keeping you all up at night as you look to the future? And on the flip side, what gets you excited? What has you frothing at the mouth, so to speak? And perhaps we'll start down here and we'll make our way up to you, Lucinda.
Yeah, I think the keeping awake at night is the safety element. Being a live service, any moment there's some human trying to do something terrible, and so that's always a risk for us because then we have to rebuild trust with brands, et cetera, and it distracts us for many months. What most excites me now is things that we can do for the viewer experience that we couldn't do before, because you can make sense of what's happening. You can help a viewer understand, make connections. Obviously, from a search and a match perspective, it's incredible in terms of what we can do now that we couldn't do even a year ago.
I think for me, it's just like the pace of the industry, the metabolism of it all. The models drift. Every night I go to sleep, I'm like, is there going to be a new model tomorrow? is there some new finding? Is my team figured something out? But that's also very exciting. I think that's why, after I had left Dropbox, I thought I was not going to work in tech for a while, maybe go back to the music industry, but the models basically sucked me back in, right? Like that, the exciting part is to be part of this journey where organizations and marketing teams are really rewiring themselves around this new piece of infrastructure. And, many days, it's a little bit scary because you don't know what's going to change, right? And at the same time, that's the exciting part, is that you get to work on the frontier. All of us do.
Please.
I think what's keeping me up at night is keeping the balance of the excitement of potential of transformation and automation with my own team. And as soon as you delegate some of your agency, some of your creativity, you kind of quickly lose the taste and judgment. How do I train that with my team? And so I'm thinking about things like, do we actually bank the time that we're saving in actually reflecting on creative work, on thinking about what made this move or not? So keeping the human element. And what is exciting, I came to Cannes last year and I just remember after every panel, everyone was talking about how great AI was, and they would get off the panel and immediately say, oh my God, I don't think I'll be here next year. I'm going to lose my job. There was this I don't know if anyone else noticed that. It was this funny, the conversations off platform were totally different than on platform. And what I'm feeling this time, a day and a half in, is this deep acknowledgement of the power of human creativity, that this is actually seen as a competitive advantage for your brand, for your business, and an embracing of the latest tools. But a confidence, the swagger of back to say, actually, we're in-housing. Actually, we are protecting this creativity. Actually, we're bringing this creativity even closer to product teams, to business teams. So that makes me very excited.
I think that's a great place to end. Thank you to this fantastic trio for such a thought-provoking and forward-looking conversation. Really tactical. Thank you.